Okay, thank you all for being here. Final session of the day. Genuinely really pleased to see so many people still with us here, and obviously to listen to our fantastic panel that we've managed to pull together to talk about procurement strategies. It's the Procurement Strategies Forum. Now, as well as the audience here physically in the room, as you know, we have our online audience as well. We had around 900 to 1,000 of you streaming live yesterday, so thank you so much for that. And then all of these sessions are available to watch on demand as well. So if you've downloaded the Brella app, then you can watch all of the sessions that we had yesterday from stage 1 and stage 2. And then all of the sessions from today will also be available to watch. And then give it another week or so, and then all of these sessions will also be on YouTube and across our websites and our social media channels as well. But I'm talking too much. Let me introduce our panel, or rather they can introduce themselves, starting please with Cameron.
Thank you, Scott. Cameron Smith. I'm Head of Indirect Procurement for Professional Services at Novartis in Switzerland. Matt?
Matt Yanshishin. I'm the General Manager for AWS Marketplace.
I'm Abir Abu Saada, Senior Procurement Manager working for Masader for Natural Resources. It's one of subsidiaries of Palestine Investment Fund.
Please welcome your panel. Thank you. Now, we were just talking backstage, and we've pulled together a fantastic panel here, all from very different backgrounds, very different experiences. So I'm hoping that will actually also generate some interesting conversation around some common topic areas when it comes to procurement strategies. So let's start with Cameron. We'll throw him in at the deep end, and then I'm hoping that our other panelists will just join in and pick up on what he has to say. So Cameron, how does your procurement strategy even prioritize diversity and inclusion?
So diversity and inclusion is one of the mainstays of the organisation. It's one of the stated goals of the C-suite and also supported by the board. It's almost a mandatory now. You have to have some form of diversity and inclusion, not because you have to do it, but because it's the right thing to be doing. So that runs through every core part of our business. So we go into every strategy development session with stakeholders, with suppliers, with our colleagues, knowing that D&I is a core component. And that's geographic, it's race, it's sexual orientation, gender, it's the whole spectrum of that. And what that gives us is, it gives a really solid platform, a really base foundation for developing our strategies in line with what the corporate philosophy is, which is what any good strategy does. So that's a start, and it's a really, really good solid start. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was more around business objective, business need, EBITDA, profitability, growth, expansion, whatever the corporate goals were. But these more intangible, less financial, more tangible but less financial needs give us a really, really strong platform for creation of a strategy. It gives us a really good solid framework.
And Matt?
I guess, I'm on the other side, the procurement, the CPO and the procurement teams are our customers, so we're not doing as much procurement ourselves. However, I can say that, at least from an engineering perspective, I definitely ascribe to the belief and really the truth that diverse teams build better software. And so when it comes, we're just, like many companies, returning to the office and getting back to more aggressive hiring. Thankfully, we're growing. And so when we pick the locations we're hiring in the United States, for example, we're very intentional about what metropolitan areas we base our teams in so that we can source from more diverse talent pools. And so we're very, proactive about building diverse teams and really creating the right mechanisms to feed the right, in my case, software development engineer pipeline so that we can have those diverse teams that build better solutions for all of you.
Actually, I'd like to start with the quotes. Diversity is a mix. Inclusion is making the mix work. All of you know this quote. So from our company, it's a renewable energy company. Within our framework with the renewable energy, we have I will give you an example. We have Engineers Fellows Program. This program is focused on inclusion, gender equity, and bringing like young females who recently graduated from universities to the program to engage them in the job training, to engage them in the procurement and supply industry. Actually, their close engagement has been resulted in improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of supply chain. Another thing we have all the time promote the inclusive of women oriented business. This is very important all the time across the functional teams, across the internal stakeholders, and even with organizational decision makers. We engage them in all the activities, in all the procurement activities. We have to arrange workshops for them, and also to qualify like lists of qualified women and connect them with the procurement opportunities.
Okay, thank you. And Cameron, coming back to you again now, what steps have you taken to ensure equal opportunities for diverse suppliers in your process, in your procurement process?
So I'm lucky enough to have a D&I, a colleague who's passionate about D&I working in my team. Not everyone is as lucky as I have been with Adrian, so they've had to actually go out and find people within the business to support them on that. I've got someone, it's part of my team, she's part of my team. She helps remind everyone that D&I is a core tenet of the company, so that strategy is designed, vendor selections or vendor nominations are designed around making sure that we don't have just the same old faces, the same old opportunities, the same direction, that we look at alternatives. Now, I'm also a big believer in equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome. So you might find that a lot of your spend directionally, your engagements in professional services head towards a similar area. I often joke that there's not much diversity in tax advisors. They're usually white, usually middle-aged, usually bald, usually overweight. I'm joking here, most likely divorced. So there's not a lot of diversity there. But it's making sure that you're looking for an alternative view. You're bringing together more than your traditional tunnel vision view.
It sounded like you were describing the audience at the stamp show downstairs.
I wouldn't be so
there.
unkind.
I can't possibly comment on that. Now, Matt, same question to you really, and I realise you're coming at it from a different angle here, but in terms of making more equitable opportunities for diverse suppliers, what's your take on that from AWS's perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, while it may not be from a sourcing perspective, certainly I can speak from the way that we engage with our partners. As AWS Marketplace, I think you have to be intentional in this regard. Like the fact that we're not on an all male, all white panel is a good thing, and sometimes you have to work at that, and you have to sort of push back. And so when we're working at our events, we run a lot of large cloud events and procurement events. We're intentional about having a diverse mix of speakers and providing opportunities for businesses and partners of all types from different parts of the world, of different types of backgrounds, different races. Again, being intentional about highlighting, being noisy about supporting Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and including them very prominently in our partner strategy. And I think you have to be, again, intentional about being part of the solution and in creating more diversity and creating, leveling the playing field in terms of creating equal opportunities for all types of partners. We could just go with the same old massive tech partners just in the US, just with the same faces we've seen for years, or we could help to diversify and raise up the next generation of big cloud businesses that represent our diverse customer base a little bit better. So that's what we try to do.
And sorry, can I just jump in? That diversity of inclusion in the opportunity actually changes the game from the people that you are traditionally working with, because they see that as competition. They see that as their need to be able to move with times and change their approach, so you don't get that same tunnel vision. But you're all of a sudden making bigger suppliers, more mainstream suppliers, more aware of that diversity by involving more diverse suppliers. So it changes not only the SME sector, but also at the large global multinational sector as well.
Yeah. I actually, just to give a specific example, I'll give a quick shout out to one of our partners, MongoDB, who some of you might know is a successful software company. And I remember many, many years ago at a conference just like this in New York City, they had a principal or a senior engineer panel, and it was all women. And while that shouldn't surprise anyone, it was surprising in the sense that you typically see a very stereotypical sort of software development panel of a certain demographic, typically men, typically white or Asian men. And this was an intentional, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it certainly had an effect on the audience, and it left me with a lasting positive impression of the company. And fast forward to more recently, and there's a specific partner that we have in the consulting partner space we work with closely. It's a women-owned, black-owned business, and they did an amazing job. I won't say who, but let's just say in a particular program we were running, they ended up beating one of the world's largest consulting companies in terms of number of opportunities closed. And not only just the fact that this small business beat this large consulting company was maybe embarrassing to a large software company, but the fact that it was a minority-owned, women-owned business was something to celebrate. And so we were celebrating both the business success, but also giving visibility to a partner that, again, represents more accurately our diverse customer base. So.
And Abir, how are you tackling
Yeah.
this? How are you promoting or giving equal opportunity to diverse?
Yeah, all the time. We have keen to see our procurement database. It should be diverse of suppliers. It's not like just focusing on strong suppliers or who are dominating the sector. We need like small enterprise suppliers. As you mentioned, women-owned businesses are very important to be included in the procurement and connected procurement opportunities. So this is from angle. From another angle, during the evaluation process, we have included like diversity, sustainability, inclusion, gender equity. We need to see our suppliers, our partners. Did they really practice it on the ground? Did they do something within their organization? Did they have some track records? So all the time we need to encourage this and assess it. And all the time, not just put it in the papers, without do it on the ground.
Yeah.
One of the things that the US government is very strong on in terms of healthcare is awarding of business to organisations that can prove a diversity of supply chain. So in the healthcare market, the US is the biggest market in the world. It shouldn't be by number of people, but it is in terms of market value. So they are very, very critical of organisations that don't have that diversity of supply. If you want to break into the US or want to maintain your position in the US, you need to. It's a mandate, and it's a good mandate because it encourages you to think differently and think more diverse and inclusive in your supply base. If you don't have that, you're not likely to win government work. And that is now starting to be replicated across other health organisations around the world. The NHS would be the next biggest. They're looking at what the results of that is. So it's not trickle down, it's flow down policy implementation around the globe.
Okay, I'm going to move on to talk about technology because we've got so many topics that we could talk about. We are limited by time here. Matt, I'm going to talk about technology. How can emerging technologies such as AI and machine learning enhance procurement strategies, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest ways where I see it impacting it already is in discovery. So I mentioned this yesterday in the keynote I was saying yesterday, the days of sort of the procurement team, at least when it comes to cloud procurement, software in the cloud, et cetera, just kind of laying out the options and being, here are your 4 choices. You have to pick one of these vendors. They are fast disappearing, if not gone already. And there's much more of a self-service, in my world, a developer-driven procurement culture when it comes to technology solutions, certainly in software. And it's a vast ecosystem. And search is actually difficult, finding the right tool for the job. So using semantic search, generative AI, or the way to summarize research. This is one exciting area of generative AI where if you need to buy highly specialized software solution, for example, there's tons of research out there, but it's a lot to consume. And so you can save yourself a lot of time by summarizing that information or by having the machine learning enhanced search guide you to the right decision. And often, procurement teams, one of their jobs is to help really teams make the right choice. Does it fit within the CIO's technology strategy? Does it fit within the GRC or the governance guardrails or the security requirements? Is it ticking all the right boxes? And ultimately, is it the right tool for the job? And these are areas where, through a mix of summarization, enhanced search, et cetera, machine learning and Gen AI can really speed up procurement. And ultimately, that's what a lot of us are trying to do here, is move faster. So I think accelerating discovery and ultimately choosing of solutions is one key area.
You're making it sound there like technology is almost working like a catalyst. So it's speeding up the process, but not affecting the end result. So you saying that that is the case, it provides the speed, but ultimately the procurement executives are still making the same decisions, or are the decisions being swayed by the technology?
Sometimes. I mean, in some cases, the decision is made. Ultimately, I think in most cases, judgment will rest in the hands of whether it's the procurement team or developer, wherever the decision lies. But, I'll give you a real example from AWS, from Amazon Web Services, where I work. We use machine learning today to programmatically recommend partner solutions, third parties, to our own sales field that they then can pass on to the customer. And, we're exploring, do we even need that two-step? Could we just, pass on the recommendation directly? And what we're experimenting with now is how to use machine learning to build solutions. So if you have an industry solution in automotive, for example, what are the right mix of first and third-party services you need to build that? Sometimes an architect is the right person to make that, most of the time. But oftentimes, a machine learning algorithm, having learned through billions of repetitions, can make a better solution choice, perhaps a more secure, more efficient, more cost, more practical, whatever dimension is most important to you, choice based on the reams of information that it can process. So I think it's a mix of aiding the process, but in some cases making a better recommendation that you just accept immediately.
Yeah. Abir, how do you see the technology impacting the procurement process?
Actually, in contract management, I will give real example that we have practices. We have like similar solar PV plants across all Palestine, and we have like solar rooftops over the schools. After we have completed the constructions and connected all the plants on the grid, we need to do like operation and maintenance for all of them. So we have connected AI technology to monitor all of the inverters on the different platforms with different manufacturers. So you in the office, you can see that that inverter is not working. That needs maintenance. We don't have to worry about have the skilled workers in the field to monitor all the platforms. So it was very amazing and easy way to deal with the maintenance, to have efficient and effective data from the field, to give you more insights, what kind of predictive maintenance we need to do. So yeah, it's very technology we have adapted in contract managing for managing operation and maintenance contracts.
I love that example. IoT and sort of predictive maintenance is such an amazing space where ML is really live. And I think that's a really good example tying what you just said to what you were asking, where, if a part's broken, does the procurement team need to get involved to procure that part? Maybe not. Maybe through machine learning, that part can be automatically ordered and delivered to the site that needs repairing. So, a great example, I think, that illustrates what I was trying to say before. So, yeah.
And Cameron, can you help Matt with his answer?
Yeah, so I'm going to be a counter to Matt's assessment earlier on.
I'm the tech guy, so
we don't. So in prof services, it's probably the last bastion of the judgment exercised by employees, and I think that's because a lot of the decisions made are expensive, they're high profile, they bring an element of risk, but they also bring a level of accountability if you get it wrong. If you get the selection of a law firm wrong, it's very public if you lose that case, or if your transaction support doesn't go through, the transaction doesn't complete as it should. It's got share price impact, and therefore it's got personal accountability. So we are not seeing that as a push or a requirement in Novartis because of that personal accountability. We're also not blind to the fact that people have their preferences of who they've used in the past. So that might be a disruptor to who they want to use, who they want to engage. But as Matt and I were talking about before the session, it's coming. We can't stave that off. There are less and less opportunities for people to say no to technology and AI in what we do. But we are I kind of consider us to be the last bastion of doing it ourselves.
I think one thing you just said that's really interesting is that notion of bias, and the word that you said in a different context, the word blind, and I think it's interesting because humans are obviously biased and they can have choice, and often humans are the best sort of decision makers. but sometimes humans bring the wrong kind of bias to the table too, just like machine learning algorithms can too, which is why it's important that we develop them safely. But if done right, you can actually reduce bias in those choices as well.
Humans have got millions of years of making the wrong decisions. So hopefully the technology should aid, but it is just a tool. I use the monkey with a hammer analogy, that if you give a monkey a hammer, it's still a hammer in the hands of a monkey. It's not the be all and end all. It still needs someone to exercise judgment and to program and to maintain and support and upgrade and help that machine learn.
Yeah, that's why I'm really excited about not to advertise, but the investment that Amazon recently made in Anthropic that was just announced this week, is that machine learning and generative AI company specifically, that one of their big areas of focus is safety, developing safe algorithms. So yes, we should be very conscious of where we introduce machine learning, but I think you're right. I think it can, if done right, improve things, but not replace everything.
Not replace, no.
Yeah.
Support. Supplement, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on a word you mentioned, Cameron, which was risk. So what are the, changing tack slightly again on the conversation here, what are the best practices for assessing and mitigating supply chain risks in procurement? And this is obviously something that's been in the spotlight and on the front pages of newspapers for the last few years. Abir, I'll come to you first. How are you addressing that? How are you mitigating risk in the supply chain?
Actually, first, you need to understand where your business is operating, what the context, what the area, before starting doing, or let's do your business plans, or you're putting the plans here and there. Because understanding the business needs, understanding the context or where you're operating is very important. So you start from here, then you can see supplier relation management, how I can do it, then the complexity of goods and service from where I can get it. So because it's different from region to region. So if you understand the context and where you are working, so from there you can start to design for next steps. But you can't jump to the supplier relation management without knowing your business where is operating. I will give you an example for this. Once you are working like vulnerable areas, politically insecure areas, and very high risk areas, do you think you need suppliers are the same who are working with comfortable areas? No. Here you need to look to the supplier risk analysis. You need to bring good suppliers, because to comply with or to be compatible with the area that you are working in. So even the complexity of goods and service, you need to look the good suppliers or who can bring those, because we have a specialty in that area, especially when it comes to like emergency management, crisis response. So this is the most important.
And Cameron, Novartis?
Yeah, data. I often joke that Novartis is a data company that makes drugs on the side. There's so much data that's collected in the operations of the business, patient trials, testing, et cetera, like an insane amount of data, that it almost becomes a data company. And that's the asset. That's one of the biggest assets of the company. And the more you can interpret that data, and the more that you can call out and see where your risk areas are, that helps you better inform where you should be focusing your attention on in the future. That and past mistakes and past successes should, with the data, help you navigate where you should be doing in line with corporate strategy as well. So you can't just do this blind to what the overall objective of the company is. But the data angle on that is probably the key. Navigating how you interpret, how you disseminate, how you qualify all of that data. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I love the two examples because it just shows you that there's so many different dimensions of risk. Like, Abir, what you were talking about with supply chain for care, or like we were talking about before the interview, and data. When I think of risk, I think of everything. I wake up and I think of risk every single day. It could be security, it could be software supply chain, physical supply chain, it could be data, PII, leakage, et cetera. I think for me, when I think about risk, it's really about how to assess that risk, because you never get rid of risk. It's getting to the acceptable level of risk. It's the challenge of every CISO and everyone involved in risk. And I'm glad we didn't even raise compliance, because compliance is just kind of one thing you do to to mitigate risk or better understand risk. But one thing that wasn't raised is that we face a lot is financial viability is another form of risk. You know, we're doing a lot of, or assisting our customers in procuring software solutions, and they want to procure solutions that are in for the long haul, companies that aren't going to be absorbed and shut down by another company, or companies that are in good financial straits. So that's one dimension of risk we're always looking at, in addition to data and security and other dimensions.
Okay, let's talk about partnerships, because they're obviously essential to every organisation. What role do they play in procurement strategies? How significant are those partnerships and those relationships? I'll start with a beer.
Yeah, you know, the answer is you need to look to the at internal level within your organization. You need like all the time collaboration between cross-functional teams, the most between finance, legal, procurement. You are not. This is not only procurement. It's all of us, not me, not you, not him, because the procurement is a collaboration between all of us. Even you need to involve like higher management, like the internal stakeholders. Another thing you need to look from other angle for external stakeholders like strategic sourcing suppliers. You need to segment your suppliers, who's strategic suppliers, who's a bottleneck, who's leveraging. So it's very important to see the types of partnership at internal level and external level.
Cameron?
I look at it from the perspective that we as buyers or procurement managers, we see a spectrum of relationships, internal and external. And sometimes having the internal discussion and the internal negotiation is much, much harder than the external. But you see people who do it well and who want to engage and want to be longer term and want certain things and they're more direct about it. But you also see people who are short term, blind to what the possibilities are into the future. I think our job is to make sure that you ensure that your supply base, your customer relationships, your stakeholder relationships are where you want them to be, that you encourage, you engage your collaborators to think in the same way that you want. If you're looking medium term, get them all on that medium term train. If you're looking long term, try and convince them that this is in the best interest of the company, you, them, everyone, in order to look towards that longer term frame.
I mean, partnerships is my whole world with AWS Marketplace, and so I think of it two ways. You know, one way is the partnerships from a dependency perspective when we're building software, and you assume a shared responsibility with the partners who you build solutions with. But I think specific to AWS Marketplace, or even more generally with AWS, increasingly our services themselves are built in partnership with partners. If you look at SageMaker Bedrock, which is our new generative AI service, it's through the partnerships with AI21 and Cohere and Anthropic and all these kind of emerging generative AI companies that product will be successful. But where it comes with complexity is that adds another vendor effectively to the mix. When someone is using our service for generative AI, they're using our service plus Anthropic or plus AI21 and plus Cohere. So it's our job to help them understand, how can they operate that securely? How can they reduce all forms of risk when they're putting their data into the service to build models around, and it's really core to the value prop of the service and really important for us to help customers understand that. So with adding partnerships and with the number of partnerships, you do grow complexity, but if you do it right, you can mitigate risk and create even better solutions.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? I am going to turn to you in a second. If you do, put your hands up. Otherwise, I'm just going to carry on with the questions I have here. Did I see a hand then? I feel like an auctioneer. Did I see a hand? I did see a hand. Could we get the microphone down to Natasha, please? You can't backtrack now. I've said your name.
Yeah, I'll talk loud enough. Hi there. Matt, my question is for you based on what you were saying now. How do I articulate this? So 100% when we partner up with tech companies, right, there's tier 1, tier 2, there's multiple different companies involved, and my relationship is with the tier 1. So typically any risk, any liability is at that level. But I've found in often circumstances where the challenges or the troubles are coming further down the line. And slowly as the project continues, you're having to engage beyond your tier 1. So to try and get to my question, in your experience, what is the best model? Or is it simply we talk about contractual agreements that have liability clauses or penalty clauses? It doesn't really work. You know, you really want to get to an outcome. You really want to achieve a great solution. So, you know, what sort of route should be taken in this regard? How do you approach this when you know that there's so many different tech companies behind, you know, all collaborating or partnering together to get your solution? I hope my question was clear.
I mean, in fact, that's a great question because it's why I'm here at this conference to have those types of discussions. I mean, you're absolutely right, and especially as the use of the cloud has matured at most large enterprises over the last few years, everything they build in the cloud typically incorporates both a mix of what I would call first-party AWS services and additional third-party software, sort of all intermingled to solve different industry or horizontal solutions. And you're right, when there's multiple vendors in the mix, who do you call, or how do you assess risk in that more complex scenario? Is that along the lines of what you're asking? And so that's exactly why we have, well, first of all, AWS Marketplace, which is this one of the services I run. It facilitates the connection with the vendor, but we're the facilitator. You're right. We're not assuming all liability on behalf of the third party. There's a liability component with the third party. But what we can do, and what we do with features like Vendor Insights for Marketplace, is we can give you information that allow you to make a better informed choice about that risk. Like I mentioned, financial stability, we surface that metric. I mentioned compliance frameworks. We can show you if a given vendor is GDPR compliant or PCI DSS if you're building a retail solution. And we can allow you to download those attestations so your auditors can check them. We can give you standard terms and contracts that we negotiate ahead of time with the vendor so that your legal team can feel more comfortable with the terms and conditions that you're signing up for with that third party if you purchase it through Marketplace. And so we can essentially fast track all of those checks and balances that you would have to do to feel comfortable with the operating model and really with the procurement strategy associated with that third-party purchase. So I think, yeah, through legal standard terms, through risk assessment criteria and data that we can service, we essentially make your life easier because there will be a mix of liabilities, and it's important that you can more quickly understand that. And so, you know, there's no magic bullet, but certainly when you procure through the cloud, if you're having to negotiate each of those separately and having to make those assessments yourself separately, it just takes way too long, and it'll pause up. So that's why we have Marketplace and the features that we do.
Okay, thank you. That question was from Natasha Schultz, by the way, from Evercare. Moving on, Cameron, I want to ask you a question. What's the biggest challenge that you currently face when it comes to executing your procurement strategy? What keeps you awake at night?
As I said earlier, the biggest challenge you've got is internal alignment. A lot of the challenges overcome by the time you get to negotiating with suppliers. So strategizing and making sure that you've got a position that is palatable, accepting of business, accepted by the business, cognizant of where the business is going, potential risks, direction, strategy, right sizing, change in business operations, etc., etc. Making sure that it's logical enough to deal with what you've experienced in the past, like facts from the past at a point in time, but projecting forward is decent enough to be able to have that discussion with the stakeholders that they sign off on it and say, directionally, this is where we want to go. That's the thing that keeps me up at night. Once you get to implementing that with tenders and supplier development with suppliers, that's the easy bit. That's a walk in the park in comparison to a lot of the internal discussions we have.
And Abia, same question to you. What's the biggest challenge you're facing?
Actually, change management for us, because when it comes to like a new product with a new market, you need to change the strategy of the procurement that you are working. So you will have a lot of resistance from the team. The first thing, why we need this? Do you think it's applicable in our situation? Do you think we need all of this? What the cost effectiveness? Do we need to reduce the cost? So it comes, you need a lot of time. You need to give them real example. It will affect and will give you more. It will make our supply chain process more efficient and more effectiveness. And it will reduce the cost. So at the beginning, they will be somehow afraid to go with you with your new strategies. Especially they are not familiar in procurement. So yeah, big resistance from the team at the beginning. Also, when it comes integration, new technology, finance, they have their own system, legal, own system, procurement, own system. Okay, I want to integrate all of these systems with one system. each one will start saying, no, it will not work with me like this. No, it will not work with me. So they're afraid, anyone in the world, they're afraid of entering new things. So all the time like this.
Matt, I think you've already told us what keeps you awake at night, but anything to add there, or any words of comfort to the people sat next to you?
Well, I think if you're comfortable, if you're not doing your job right, you know, if I want to always be moving so fast that I'm mildly to moderately uncomfortable. And so, you know, what keeps me up at night is, am I moving fast enough? It's speed, and certainly procurement plays a big part of that, whether it's vendors that we use to build our own solutions or hardware capacity to keep growing at the speed we're growing in the cloud. So for me, yeah, the biggest challenge is continuing to stay day one, as we say, continuing to move fast.
Okay, well, I think that's a great way to end it, and I hope we've kept you suitably uncomfortable over the last 2 days, and certainly during the last sessions. Please join me in thanking Cameron, Matt, and Abir. Thank you.
Thank you.